The stars had always been quiet for humanity. For 300 years, they had spread across 12 small systems at the edge of the galaxy. They built colonies. They raised families. They believed, perhaps foolishly, that the universe would leave them alone. Admiral Park stood at the window of Earth's Defense Command, watching ships move slowly across the orbital station. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and eyes that had seen too much death. 20 years ago, he had lost his wife and daughter when pirates attacked their colony transport. He had spent every day since preparing for the next attack. Today, that attack had come. 3 colonies, said Captain standing behind him. She was younger than him, sharp-faced and sharp-tongued, with short black hair and a reputation for brutal honesty. 3, station and new, all gone dark within 1 week. No distress calls, no survivor signals, nothing. Park did not turn from the window. Almost certainly, handed him a data pad. Our long-range sensors picked up energy signatures matching their weapons. They didn't even try to hide it. Park finally looked at the data. They were one of the most powerful species in the Galactic Concord, an alliance of 200 alien races that controlled most of known space. Humanity had met them 50 years ago during first contact. The meeting had not gone well. They had looked at humans the way a man might look at insects, with disgust and a desire to step on them. For 50 years, humanity had stayed quiet. They had built their colonies far from conquered space. They had traded carefully, spoken softly, and never caused trouble. And for 50 years they had also been preparing, building ships, developing weapons, training soldiers, hoping they would never need any of it. That hope was dead now. The door opened, and Doctor entered. He was a small man with thick glasses and nervous hands, the kind of person who looked more comfortable in a laboratory than a war room. But Park knew better. Was the most dangerous man in human space. He had spent 30 years developing weapons that no alien species had ever seen. The Council has made their decision, said. They're giving you the 7th Fleet. Park raised an eyebrow. All of it. All 47 ships, every experimental weapon we've developed, everything. Paused. They want you to find out what happened to our colonies, and they want you to respond. Respond how? His eyes were cold behind his glasses. However you see fit. Let out a low whistle. They're giving us permission to start a war. No, Park said quietly. They started the war, they just didn't tell us. He turned to face them both. How soon can the fleet be ready? 12 hours, said. Make it 6. 6 hours later, Park stood on the bridge of the flagship Horizon's Edge. It was humanity's most advanced warship, sleek and deadly, carrying weapons that had never been tested in real combat. Around it, 46 other ships formed up in perfect formation. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers full of fighters, every ship humanity could spare. It wasn't enough. Park knew that. They had thousands of warships. If they wanted humanity dead, these 47 ships would only delay the inevitable. But delay might be enough. Delay might buy Earth time to build more ships, develop more weapons, find allies among the other species who feared the. Every day mattered now. All ships report ready, Admiral, said from her station. Park looked at the main screen. Earth hung there, blue and beautiful, wrapped in white clouds. He had been born on that world. His parents were buried there. Everything humanity had ever been, ever dreamed, ever loved, it all came from that small blue dot. Open a channel to the fleet, he said. His voice echoed across 47 ships, heard by 12,000 sailors and soldiers. This is Admiral Park. 6 days ago, someone attacked our colonies. They killed our people, our families, our children. They left no survivors. They sent no warning. They showed no mercy. He paused. We are going to find out who did this, and we are going to make them answer for it, not because we want war, but because if we don't, they will come for Earth next. They will come for everyone we love, and we will not allow that. We cannot allow that. He straightened his shoulders. All ships engage hyperspace drives, course set for 3. The stars stretched into lines of light, and the fleet vanished into hyperspace. 4 days later, they arrived. Park had seen death before. He had seen battlefields and massacres, burning cities and floating bodies, but nothing had prepared him for 3. The colony was gone, not conquered, not occupied, gone. Where 50,000 people had lived, worked, raised families, now there was only ash and rubble. The atmosphere was poison. The water was black. Nothing lived, nothing moved. Survivors? Park asked, already knowing the answer. Shook her head. None detected, but were picking up something else. A signal beacon design. On screen. The beacon appeared, a small metal sphere floating among the debris. It was broadcasting a message in Galactic Common, the shared language of the conquered. The translation scrolled across the screen in cold, simple words. Kneel or burn. For a long moment, no one on the bridge spoke. Park stared at those 3 words. He thought of his wife, his daughter, 50,000 people who had wanted nothing but peaceful lives among the stars. Captain, he said finally. His voice was calm, too calm. Sir. Set course for station. We need to see if there are any survivors at the other colonies. He paused. And then we need to find the who did this. And when we find them, sir. Park's eyes were hard as stone. Then we teach them what happens when you wake a sleeping world. The fleet jumped back into hyperspace. Behind them, the ruins of 3 drifted silently in the void, waiting for justice that was finally coming. The ruins of station were worse than 3. At least 3 had been quick, showed signs of a longer death, blast marks on walls, dried blood in corridors. The colonists had fought back. They had resisted, and they had died anyway, one by one, hunted through their own homes by creatures who saw them as nothing more than prey. Captain walked through the wreckage with a squad of Marines. Her boots crunched on broken glass and shattered metal. Every few steps, they found another body. She stopped counting after 50. Captain, one of the Marines called out, "Over here, we've got survivors." Ran. In a collapsed basement hidden beneath fallen walls, they found them. 17 people huddled in the darkness, starving, terrified, alive. Among them was a little girl, maybe 7 years old. She sat perfectly still, staring at nothing. Her clothes were torn and dirty. Her eyes were empty. Knelt in front of her. Hey, little one, you're safe now. We're from Earth. We're going to take you home." The girl looked at her. "They killed my mom and dad," she whispered. "The tall ones with the blue skin, they laughed. They laughed while they did it." Felt something cold settle in her chest. She had been a soldier for 15 years. She had learned to control her emotions, to stay calm in any situation. But looking at this child, she felt a rage so pure it nearly choked her. She picked the girl up and carried her to the shuttle herself. Back on the horizon's edge, Admiral Park reviewed the intelligence reports. Ambassador O stood across from him, a thin man with a worried face. Had spent his whole career trying to build bridges between humanity and the conquered. He still believed in diplomacy. He still believed there had to be another way. "Let me try to contact them," said. "Let me at least attempt negotiation. Perhaps this was a rogue commander. Perhaps the government will condemn these attacks." Park looked at him with tired eyes. "You really believe that?" "I have to try. I have to know we exhausted every option before we start a war." Park was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Send your message, but make it quick. We don't have much time." Sent his message on every diplomatic channel. He spoke of peace, of understanding, of a desire to avoid further bloodshed. He asked for a meeting, a negotiation, anything. The response came 3 hours later. It was not from the government. It was from a supremacy commander named, the leader of the fleet that had destroyed the human colonies. His image appeared on the main screen, tall, blue-skinned, with sharp teeth and eyes like a predator. "Little insects," said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You dare to speak to us of peace. You who crawled out of your mud world only yesterday. We have conquered 1,000 species. We have burned 100 worlds. And you think you can negotiate with us?" He laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Here is my negotiation. Surrender your fleet. Surrender your colonies. Surrender become our slaves, and we might let some of you live. Refuse, and we will exterminate every single one of you. We will burn Earth itself. We will make sure that no one ever remembers you existed." The transmission ended. Stood frozen, his face pale. Park put a hand on his shoulder. "You tried," he said quietly. "Now you know." "What do we do now?" "Now we fight." Doctor gathered the senior officers in the weapons lab. For 30 years, he had worked on a secret project. Only a handful of people knew it existed. Today, he would show them what humanity could really do. "We call it the protocol," he said, displaying a holographic image of a new weapons system. "Our ships can now fire concentrated stellar plasma. Plasma from the heart of a star, contained and directed through quantum fields. No known shielding in the galaxy can stop it. Nothing can survive direct contact." Lieutenant, the leader of the fleet's fighter squadrons, stared at the display. She was a fierce woman with scars on her hands from too many close calls. "You're saying we can hit them with star fire?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." Leaned forward. "Has it been tested?" "In simulations, thousands of them, it works." Paused. "But we've never used it on living targets." "I think we're about to get plenty of practice," Park said. "Our scouts report a patrol approaching. 12 ships. They're probably looking for survivors from the colonies." 12 ships," said, a dark smile crossing her face. "Give me my squadron, I'll handle them." Park nodded. "Lieutenant, you have command of the first strike. Show them what humans can do." 24 human fighters launched from the carrier, screaming into the black toward the patrol. The enemy ships were larger, more heavily armed, with shields that had never been broken by any weapon the conquered knew. But they had never faced the protocol. Led the attack personally. Her fighter dove toward the lead destroyer, dodging plasma fire with moves that should have been impossible. At the last second, she fired. A beam of light brighter than anything they had ever seen struck their ship. Their shields flickered, flashed, and died. The beam punched through the hull like it wasn't there. The ship exploded in a ball of white fire. "All units called, weapons free, light them up." The battle lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes for 24 human fighters to destroy 12 warships. No human casualties. Complete enemy annihilation. One ship managed to send a final transmission before it died. Just a few words, screamed in terror across the void. "They burn like stars, they burn like..." Then silence. Supremacy Commander received the transmission in his command chamber. He played it 3 times. He studied the sensor data his scouts had gathered before their deaths. He watched human weapons tear through shields like they were made of paper. For 100 years had conquered worlds. He had crushed rebellions, destroyed fleets, exterminated species. He had never known fear. He had never needed to. But now, watching that footage, he felt something cold crawling up his spine. Something he had not felt since he was a child. The humans were not supposed to be a threat. They were supposed to be weak, easy prey, a quick victory to add to his record. Instead, they had just destroyed 12 of his ships in minutes. Turned to his second-in-command. "Gather the full armada," he said, and his voice was not quite steady. "Every ship we have, 400 warships. We end this now before it begins." "Commander, what about the human fleet? If their weapons are really..." "I don't care what their weapons are," snarled. "We outnumber them 10 to 1. We will crush them with sheer force, and then we will burn there until nothing is left but ash." Across the galaxy, other species watched and waited. They had seen the destroy countless civilizations. They expected to see it happen again. But something was different this time. Something was changing. And somewhere in the deep black, Admiral Park looked at the stars and knew that the real war was about to begin. The pale reach was a nebula that stretched across 1,000 light-years of space. Purple and blue gas clouds drifted slowly through the void, lit by the distant fires of dying stars. It was beautiful. It was haunting. And it was the only path between human space and the core systems. Admiral Park had chosen this place for the battle. If humanity was going to face the full might of the Armada, they would do it here, where the nebula's interference would limit long-range sensors and force close combat. It was the only advantage he could give his 47 ships against 400. Ensign sat at her communications station on the horizon's edge, watching the sensor displays with wide eyes. She was young, only 23, fresh from the academy. This was supposed to be a routine patrol assignment, a chance to see space before returning home to start her real career. Nobody had told her she would be fighting in the biggest battle in human history. "Contact," the sensor officer announced. "Multiple hyperspace signatures, they're here." The nebula lit up with flashes of light as the Armada dropped out of hyperspace. 1 ship, 10 ships, 50, 100, more and more, filling the void like an endless tide of death. 400 warships, battle cruisers, destroyers, carriers, dreadnoughts, more firepower than humanity had ever faced, more than any species had ever survived. Felt her hands shaking. She gripped the edge of her console and forced herself to breathe. Admiral Park's voice came over the fleet-wide channel, calm and steady. "All hands, this is the Admiral. I know what you see out there. I know how many of them there are. And I know what you're feeling right now." He paused. Fear is not weakness. Fear is wisdom. Only a fool would not be afraid of what we face today. But we are not fools. We are the children of Earth. We carry the hopes of 12 billion people who are counting on us to protect them. His voice grew stronger. "They came to our homes. They murdered our families. They laughed when we asked for peace. Today we teach them the price of waking Earth. Today we show them what humanity can do. All ships, battle stations. May fortune favor the bold." Chief Engineer Moon ran through the engine room, shouting orders. He was a large man with oil-stained hands and dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't slept in 4 days, keeping the ships running, checking every system, preparing for this moment. "I want full power to the plasma containment fields," he yelled. "If those fields fail, we're all dead before they even get a shot off. Move it." The engines hummed with power as the fleet surged forward. On the flagship, Supremacy Commander watched the human fleet approach. Such a small force, such desperate courage. It almost made him admire them. "Almost. All ships attack pattern Delta," he commanded. "Surround them, crush them, leave nothing alive." The Armada moved like a swarm, spreading out to encircle the human fleet. 400 against 47, the mathematics of extinction. But the humans did not wait to be surrounded. "All ships execute battle plan Horizon," Park ordered. The human fleet split into 3 groups, moving with perfect coordination. Instead of trying to fight all 400 ships, they focused their fire on small sections of the enemy line, hitting the same points again and again with overwhelming force. The weapons blazed across the void. Ships exploded, their shields useless against weapons forged from stellar fire. 1, 2, 10, 20 ships died in the first minute of battle. But they had numbers on their side. They pressed forward, accepting losses, closing the distance. Plasma fire and missiles streaked across space. Human ships took hits, shields flickering, hull breaches opening. Captain commanded the 2nd battle group from her ship, the Dawn's Light. She saw an opening in the enemy formation, a gap where the command ship was vulnerable. "All ships in my group follow me," she ordered. "We're going for their command vessel." "Captain, that's suicide," her first officer shouted. "We'll be surrounded." "I don't care. If we take out their commander, their whole formation falls apart. Follow me or get out of the way." The Dawn's Light and 3 other ships punched through the enemy line, firing in all directions. Destroyers tried to intercept them, but pilots were faster, more skilled, more desperate. They reached the command ship and unleashed everything they had. The command ship's shields held, barely, but its engines were crippled, leaving it drifting and helpless. "Captain, we're taking heavy damage," the helm officer screamed. "We have to pull back." Looked at the enemy fleet closing in around them. She looked at her crew, terrified but still fighting. She made a decision. "All hands abandon ship. Get to the escape pods, that's an order." "Captain, what about you?" "Someone has to cover your escape. Now go." She stayed at the helm as her crew evacuated. She stayed and kept firing, drawing enemy attention while the escape pods fled to safety. She stayed until the Dawn's Light finally broke apart under enemy fire. But by then, her people were safe, and the command ship was dead in the water. Ensign's station exploded. Fire and sparks filled the air. She was thrown from her chair, landing hard on the deck. Her ears rang, her vision blurred, but she could still hear the communications channels, confused, chaotic, desperate voices calling for help. The main communications array was down. Without it, the fleet couldn't coordinate. They would fight as individuals, not as a team. They would lose. Crawled through the burning wreckage. Her hands were bleeding. Her uniform was torn. But she reached the backup communications panel and started working. "This is Horizon's Edge Communications," she broadcast, her voice hoarse but steady. "Main array is down, switching to backup. All ships, I'm relaying coordinates now. Alpha Group, there's a concentration of enemies at bearing 270. Beta Group, you have incoming missiles from above. Gamma Group, you've got an opening at bearing 045. Hit them now." She kept talking, kept relaying, kept the fleet connected even as the battle raged around her. Doctor stood in the weapons control center, watching the battle data flow across his screens. They were winning individual fights but losing the overall war. Too many enemies, not enough ships. They needed something more. "Admiral," he said over the command channel, "I can deploy the final stage of the protocol, the solar bomb." Park's voice came back, strained but controlled. "The weapon that creates a miniature star, you said it wasn't ready." "It's as ready as it's ever going to be. We either use it now or we don't get another chance." "How many of them will it take out?" "If I target it correctly, 50 to 100 ships, maybe more." Silence on the line, "Then do it." His fingers flew across the controls. He targeted the densest concentration of enemy ships, a cluster of 70 dreadnoughts that were tearing through the human line. He said a silent prayer to whatever gods might be listening. And then he fired. A missile streaked across the battlefield, so fast that no one could intercept it. It reached the center of the enemy cluster and detonated. For one brief, terrible moment, a new star was born. The light was blinding. The energy was unimaginable. 73 warships simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant by the fury of a newborn sun. Across the galaxy, observation drones transmitted the footage. Species who had lived in fear of them for centuries watched in stunned silence. They saw 400 ships attack 47. They saw the humans fight back with weapons that belief. They saw a miniature star erase almost a quarter of the fleet in a single heartbeat. And then they saw something they had never seen before. They saw the retreat. His voice echoed across the armada, no longer confident, no longer commanding. "All ships fall back, fall back." The surviving ships fled, leaving debris and bodies in their wake. The humans, battered and bloodied but still fighting, let them go. They were too exhausted to pursue. When the last enemy ship disappeared into hyperspace, a silence fell over the battlefield. Then, slowly, a cheer began. It spread from ship to ship, voice to voice, until 12,000 humans were crying and laughing and screaming with joy. They had won. Against impossible odds, against an enemy that had conquered the galaxy, they had won. The final count would show 312 ships destroyed. Humanity had lost 19, with 15 more badly damaged. It was the greatest victory any small fleet had ever achieved against a major power. And across 1,000 worlds, slaves looked up at the stars and whispered a single word. A word that meant hope, a word that meant freedom. Earth. News of the Battle of the Pale Reach spread across the galaxy like fire. For the first time in centuries, the mighty had been defeated, not by another great power, not by a coalition of ancient species, by humans, small, young, supposedly weak humans who had barely stepped out of their own solar system. Everything was about to change. Admiral Park did not give his fleet time to rest. While they were reeling from their defeat, he pushed forward into enemy territory. His ships were damaged, his crews were exhausted, but he knew that stopping now would only give the enemy time to recover. The first slave world they reached was called 7 in the records. Its people, a species with gray skin and gentle eyes, had been conquered 200 years ago. They had spent generations mining ore for their masters, dying in tunnels, never seeing the sky. When human ships appeared in orbit, the slaves thought it was just another patrol. They prepared for more beatings, more deaths, more suffering. Instead, they saw strange new ships landing. They saw creatures they had never met before, soft-skinned, two-legged beings with strange, flat faces. And they heard a message broadcast in their own language, translated by the fleet's computers. People of this world, we are humans from the planet Earth. We are not here to conquer you, we are here to free you. The who enslaved you have been defeated. You are slaves no more. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody believed it. It had to be a trick. Freedom was not something that happened to slaves. Then one old worker, her back bent from decades of labor, walked slowly toward the human Marines. Tears streamed down her gray face. She reached out and touched Captain's hand, had survived the battle, rescued by her own escape pod, now commanding from a new ship. "Is it true?" the old woman whispered. "Is it really true?" Looked at her, she thought of the little girl from station. She thought of everyone that had hurt. "Yes," she said, "it's really true, you're free." The old woman collapsed, sobbing. Around her, hundreds of others began to cry, to laugh, to embrace each other. 200 years of slavery ended in a single day. Among the freed slaves was a young male named. He was stronger than most, taller, with scars on his arms from fighting guards who had tried to hurt his family. He watched the humans with careful eyes. "You fight like demons," he told Admiral Park when they met. "Your weapons burn like the heart of a star, but then you land here and you help our sick, you share your food, you hold our children and tell them everything will be okay." He paused. "What are you? What kind of creatures fight like monsters but weep for strangers?" Park looked at him for a long moment. "We are human," he said simply. "We know what it means to suffer. We know what it means to lose the people we love. And we believe that no one should have to live as a slave." Was silent, then he stepped forward. "I know these systems. I know where to hide their fleets, their supplies, their secrets. Let me guide you. Let me help you free my people." Park nodded. "Welcome aboard." Back on Earth, President faced the hardest decision of her life. The United Defense Council was split. Half of them wanted revenge, total, absolute, final. Burn exterminate them the way they had tried to exterminate humanity. An eye for an eye. The other half wanted to stop now, declare victory, go home, hope that would leave them alone. Neither option felt right. "They killed millions of our people," one counselor argued. "They destroyed 3 colonies. They would have burned Earth itself if we hadn't stopped them. They deserve extinction." "And if we exterminate them, what does that make us?" another replied. "We would be no better than they are. We would become the monsters we defeated." Listened to both sides. She thought of the children who had died on 3. She thought of the slaves on 7, crying with joy at their freedom. She thought of what humanity could be and what it must never become. Finally, she spoke. "We will not commit genocide, we are better than that, but we will also not stop until this is finished. The leadership, the ones who ordered the attacks on our colonies, they will face trial. They will answer for their crimes, and their empire of slaves will be dismantled piece by piece." She looked around the room. "This is not vengeance, this is justice. There is a difference." While Earth debated, the Galactic Conquered panicked. The High Council, ancient beings who had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, watched the humans tear through space like a force of nature. 3 slave worlds freed in a week. Supply lines cut. Their fleet still recovering from the disaster at the Pale Reach. The balance of power was shifting, and the Council did not like change. They sent an emissary to the human fleet, an elder of their own species, dripping with authority and false concern. "We have watched your conflict with great interest," the emissary said, his voice smooth as oil. Most impressive indeed. The Conquered wishes to offer you an opportunity, full membership, protection, access to our trade networks, a seat at our table." Admiral Park stared at him. "The Conquered watched the slaughter our colonies. You did nothing, you said nothing. You let it happen because you thought we were too weak to matter." "Past misunderstandings," the emissary said, waving a clawed hand. "We can move past that now. The Conquered is prepared to be most generous." "In exchange for what?" "Simply stop your advance. Leave space. Let things return to normal. They are still a member of the Conquered after all. We cannot allow one species to completely destroy another. It would set a problematic precedent." Park looked at the emissary for a long moment. He thought of the beacon at 3, kneel or burn. He thought of laughing at Ambassador's request for peace. "No," he said. The emissary blinked. "I beg your pardon. No, we will not stop, we will not forget, and we will not join a council that watched our people die and did nothing." Park stepped closer, his voice cold. "Go back to your masters. Tell them that humanity remembers its friends and its enemies. We have no friends in the Conquered." The emissary left quickly. Across space, the liberation continued. World after world, species after species, chains falling away. Humans fought and bled and died to free people they had never met, people who looked nothing like them, people who had no way to repay them. And everywhere they went, they left behind the same message: Earth remembers. Earth fights for the weak. Earth does not kneel. Supremacy Commander gathered what remained of his forces at the. He had lost 200 ships at the Pale Reach. Another 50 had been destroyed in the Liberation Campaign. His empire was crumbling. His people were starting to whisper that perhaps he had made a terrible mistake, but had not survived 100 years of conquest by giving up. He was gathering every ship, every weapon, every soldier he could find. One final stand. One last battle. Win or die. Captain, now fully recovered and commanding her own battle group, received the intelligence report. They were concentrating their forces at there. They were preparing for a last stand. She brought the report to Admiral Park. "This is it," she said. "They're making their final stand at there. If we beat them there, the war is over." Park looked at the tactical display. They orbited a red giant star. Billions of lived on its surface. If humanity attacked, even with precision weapons, civilian casualties would be enormous. "We're not here to exterminate them," he said quietly. "We're here to stop their leaders, to free their slaves, to make sure they can never threaten us again." "Can we do that without burning their world?" Park was silent for a long moment. "I don't know, but we have to try." He turned to face the stars. Somewhere out there they were preparing for the end. Somewhere out there, the fate of 2 species would be decided. "Set course for the," he ordered. "It's time to finish this." It was called Prime. It was a massive planet, 3 times the size of Earth, orbiting a dying red star. Its cities stretched across entire continents. Billions of lived there, not all of them warriors, not all of them guilty. Most were just ordinary people who had been born into an empire they had never asked for. Admiral Park stared at the planet on his. Somewhere down there, children were playing. Families were eating dinner. Lives were being lived just as they were on Earth. He had the power to end all of it. One command, one word. The weapons could burn the entire surface clean. But he was not a monster. He refused to become one. All ships hold position, he ordered. We do not fire on the planet. We engage only military targets. Is that understood? Understood, Admiral. Captain stood beside him. She had lost her ship at the Pale Reach. She had nearly died, but she was still here, still fighting. They're not going to surrender, she said quietly. Would rather die than admit defeat. I know, but we have to give them the chance. Otherwise, we're no better than they are. He opened a channel to the fleet, 87 ships, everything they had left, arranged in a defensive formation around there. This is Admiral Park of the Earth Defense Fleet. We have defeated your armada. We have freed your slaves. We have proven that your empire is built on weakness, not strength. He paused. But we are not here to destroy your people. We are not here to commit genocide. We are here for one thing, the leaders who ordered the attack on our colonies. Surrender them and this war ends. Resist, and we will dismantle your fleet piece by piece. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then's voice filled the channel, dripping with hatred and madness. You dare to demand surrender, you insects, you prey. His words were barely coherent. He had lost everything, his fleet, his honor, his sanity. I will never surrender. I will die before I kneel to your pathetic species. All ships attack, attack, kill them all. The fleet surged forward. All hands battle stations, Park said calmly. Engage. The final battle was brutal. The fought with the desperation of the doomed, throwing everything they had at the human fleet. They knew they would lose. They no longer cared. They only wanted to take as many humans with them as they could. Lieutenant led her fighter squadron into the heart of the enemy formation. She had been fighting since the beginning, since the first patrol at station. She had lost friends, people she loved, but she kept flying because someone had to. Her squadron targeted the dreadnoughts, massive ships that were tearing through the human line. One by one, they took them down, darting between enemy fire, hitting weak points with missiles. But there were so many enemies, so many guns, so much death. Saw a battlecruiser lining up a shot on 2 crippled human destroyers. Hundreds of sailors on those ships, unable to maneuver, unable to defend themselves. They would die in seconds. She made a decision. All pilots break off, return to the carrier. Commander, what are you? That's an order, get out of here. She turned her fighter toward the battlecruiser. Her weapons were almost empty. Her shields were failing, but her engines still worked. She pushed them to maximum power. The impact destroyed the battlecruiser's bridge, sending the massive ship spinning out of control. It crashed into another vessel, both of them exploding in a ball of fire. The 2 human destroyers were saved. Lieutenant was gone. On the horizon's edge, Ensign wiped tears from her eyes and kept working her communication station. There was no time to grieve, no time to mourn. She would cry later if there was a later. Admiral, the enemy flagship is making a run for the planet's surface, she called out. Is trying to escape. Park's jaw tightened. Not this time, all ships pursue. The chase led them into the upper atmosphere of Prime's flagship, damaged and burning, tried desperately to reach the surface, where he could hide among the civilian population, where the humans would not dare to strike. But Captain was faster. Her ship, the Rising Sun, intercepted its flagship just above the cloud layer. A precisely targeted blast disabled his engines. The massive ship fell, crashing into an empty ocean far from any city. Marines swarmed the wreckage. They found in his command chamber, wounded but alive, still cursing, still defiant. "You will never break us," he screamed as they dragged him away. "You will never." Stepped forward and looked him in the eye. "We already have." He had no answer to that. With captured and his fleet destroyed, the remaining leadership sued for peace. They had no choice. Their military was gone. Their empire was crumbling. Species they had enslaved for centuries were rising up everywhere, inspired by humanity's example. Admiral Park addressed the galaxy from the bridge of the horizon's edge. His words were broadcast to every world, every station, every ship. "We came here not for vengeance but for justice. The who committed atrocities will face trial for their crimes. Their empire of slaves is finished, but we will not burn worlds. We will not exterminate civilians. We will not become what we fought against." He paused. "That is not what Earth does." The war was over. 1 year later, Ambassador O stood before the first session of the new Galactic Assembly. Hundreds of species were represented, not just the old powers of the conquered, but all the worlds that had been freed, all the peoples who had been enslaved. Humanity had been offered the leadership of this new coalition. They had refused. Instead, they proposed something different, a true partnership, where every species had a voice, where the strong protected the weak instead of exploiting them. "We are not here to rule," said. "We are here to help build something better, something that will outlast all of us." On the rebuilt colony of 3, Admiral Park walked through a memorial garden. Trees were growing where ashes had once covered the ground. Flowers bloomed in soil that had been poisoned. Life had returned. Names were carved into a stone wall, every person who had died in the attacks, every sailor who had fallen in battle. Park stopped in front of one section, where the names of his old crew were listed. Captain found him there. She walked up and stood beside him, saying nothing for a long moment. "You did it," she finally said. "You saved us all." "We did it," he corrected. "Everyone who fought, everyone who died, everyone who believed we could win even when it seemed impossible." He reached out and touched the wall, feeling the carved names under his fingers. "They're the real heroes. I just tried not to let them down." In his laboratory back on Earth, Doctor carefully dismantled the last of the weapon prototypes. A young assistant watched him work, curious. "Sir, why are you destroying them? They saved humanity." Paused, his hand still on the delicate machinery. "Yes, they did, but weapons like this, they're too dangerous to exist. Someone would find a way to use them for the wrong reasons. Someone always does." "But what if we need them again?" Smiled sadly. "Then we'll build them again. But I hope we never have to. I hope we've built a galaxy where weapons like this are no longer necessary." He continued his work. Piece by piece, the deadliest weapons humanity had ever created were rendered harmless. Lieutenant, now promoted after her heroism at the Pale Reach, sat in her quarters and began to write. She had decided to record the history of the war, every battle, every sacrifice, every moment of courage and fear. Future generations needed to know what had happened. They needed to understand. She thought about everything she had seen: the destroyed colonies, the desperate battles, the freed slaves crying with joy, the friends she had lost, the hope she had found. Finally, she began to type. "They thought we were weak because we were kind. They measured strength only in weapons and cruelty, in ships and soldiers and the willingness to destroy. They looked at humanity and saw small, fragile creatures who wept for strangers and refused to abandon their wounded. They thought this was weakness. They were wrong." Earth hung in space, blue and green and beautiful, just as it had for billions of years. Ships from dozens of species now visited peacefully, welcomed as friends and partners. Children who had grown up during the war looked up at the stars and dreamed not of conquest, but of exploration, of friendship, of building something wonderful together. And somewhere in the deep black of space, a message beacon drifted. the same type that had once used to threaten and terrify. But this one carried a different message, broadcasting in every language the galaxy knew. We are Earth. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We remember our friends. We do not forget what was done to us, and we are always watching. The stars had never been quiet for humanity, but now, for the first time, they had nothing to fear from the darkness. Now the darkness feared them. The end.